Skyrim is a strange game to talk about almost 8 years later, but with its latest and fifth release, The Elder Scrolls has come full circle, releasing on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and now Nintendo with the Switch edition. But before the re-releases became a joke, and before Bethesda became the laughingstock of the industry with the disastrous Fallout 76, Skyrim really was met with rave reviews upon release, including its DLC, and it really did take the RPG world by storm the way Fallout 3 did, and Bethesda had a lot to live up to at this point, including the successes of Oblivion and Fallout 3. Talking about the pros and cons, giving this game just another review, I feel, isn't really too fair, and I wanted to give this more of a retrospective look back. I came into the picture in December 2011, a month after the game's original release. I was wrapping up with high school and had a job by this point, so I remember getting a new pair of shoes, and for the sake of this video, let's say they were light armor. And I stopped in a GameStop to find one copy of The Elder Scrolls V left, and I grabbed it excitedly, and I created my first character, a Khajiit, solely because, well, I mean, it looked like a cat. I listened to the Horse Thief and Rayloff banter about mead with juniper berries mixed in, and saw the first glimpse of Alduin, the World Eater, my new enemy who incidentally saved my life from a beheading. And at this point in my gaming history, I wasn't really an RPG fan yet. I played Final Fantasy in the late 90s, but I didn't enjoy it and really understand the concept. But when I played Fallout 3, my love for RPGs changed. The mechanics and design of the gameplay in Fallout were so smooth and encouraged a lot of exploration. When I filled out my first special book in my initial playthrough, I didn't know these stats would affect the world so much that I was going to be immersed. The mechanics and design of the gameplay in Fallout were so smooth and encouraged exploration, and when I filled out my first special book in the initial playthrough, I didn't know how these stats would affect the world I was about to be immersed in. The conversations I would have, the quests I would go on, and my moral compass was tested more than once in this game. I really liked this over World at War, which was released in 2008 as well, but for some reason, I didn't feel the same sense of wonder in Skyrim. I found the atmosphere more drab and colorless than even its post-apocalyptic distant cousin. I made it to Bleak Falls Barrow, the first dungeon of the game, and I didn't get it. The plight of the Nords immersed in civil war during a returning threat of dragons in its gray color palette was just so serious. I didn't feel the charm that I did in Fallout, but this is kind of where I went wrong. Really wrong. Skyrim is not Fallout. I kept playing the comparison game and looking for what I loved rather than looking for something new. I wasn't allowing myself to truly feel like a Khajiit with a past and a future that is entirely unwritten, waiting for me to create it. So this basically is where my 2011 experience with Skyrim ends. My friends adored Oblivion and Skyrim, and I didn't get it, but I just went on with business as usual, and I was getting ready to go to college. I sold nearly all my games, Skyrim being among them. When I was just getting back into gaming a few years later, I bought the game a second time. Here's the actual Amazon order where, from July of 2015, I figured this was the time I was going to get the hype of 2011's Game of the Year. But, lo and behold, history repeated itself, and it went back on the shelf, untouched. But, as the old cliche goes, third time's a charm. So let's fast forward to the holiday season of 2017. Mrs. T and I are both buying each other Switches, and we of course got Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, and Mario Kart, but I decided to try and give Skyrim one last shot. I love the footage of Skyrim during the Switch's reveal and figured this was the time. And it was. I became Unsweetened Tea, the two-handed, weapon-wielding, restoration potion-hoarding Imperial. It was a snowy day in December. 7 years after I gave up on this game. The crunch of the snow and the frost troll hiding in its cave ready to strike my level 4 self down while traveling to the Wizard's College just really resonated with me. I loved hearing the sound of Nordic chants as I leveled up, the chime of a new location, or the drums pounding when quest text updated. I loved selling useless armor and watching my skill level increase while simultaneously making money. I find enchanted weapons and enchanted gear through dungeon crawling, so I never had to really buy weaponry. I loved selling useless armor and watching my speech skill increase while simultaneously making money. When I decided to join the Thieves Guild, I really sucked at sneak and pickpocket skills, but they quickly rose as the mysteries of Mercer Frey and the Nightingales unfolded. I couldn't wait to pull up the skill tree and rifle through another perk that ultimately went to slowly and incrementally building my own personal Dragonborn character. For once, I really felt immersed in an RPG. Call it streamlined, but I was really enjoying what I was playing. I started to ignore quest markers and started to dive deep into caverns and abandoned mines, finding beautiful loot to hoard or sell, one of my favorite aspects of the game. I leave no stone unturned. All pockets are checked, and I am persistent on gaining all I can from my slain enemies. And then it happened. I got it. I understood why gamers laughed if you've only spent 80 hours playing this game. To experience every facet of this game's impossibly huge world, it would take you easily 1,000 hours, and I don't feel an exaggeration on that statement. Days turned into weeks, and weeks to months, but well over a year later, I played this game at least 5 to 6 days a week for multiple hours at a time. I can't say it's a full-blown addiction since I don't live on the streets or anything, but I feel an almost emotional attachment to this game, or more or less my character. When I would play other games, they would be fun and all, but it still wasn't that rush that Skyrim gave me. I felt like I was almost really journeying through frozen tundras, advancing the ranks of multiple guilds, and really I was building my own property to store all my loot, none of which I actually needed. Skyrim for me became a mindless tune-in and drop-out game. On my free days, I would play this game for hours, basically a full work day. But the game never felt like that. It always felt like a few minutes, but in reality, it had been hours. I even thought I was neglecting my other games because I was playing it so much. If you put my head into, say, a brain scan machine and you track the flow of dopamine, my head would look like a cannon firing off. And I know the game is like the butt of re-release jokes, but I mean, darn it, I just got so attached. It was love at first loading screen. It was becoming my new favorite game of all time. And to knock Mario 64 off that pedestal is a pretty tall order. I can't really complain about the releases, and that seems like the next logical way to go with this retrospective. I said at the very beginning of the video that the game has been released about 5 times. The 2011 release on 360, PS3, and PC was, of course, the first. It was then re-released as the Legendary Edition in 2013 for the same platforms, with the Dragonborn, Hearthfire, and Dawnguard DLC included. There was also the Special Edition remastered for modern consoles and PC in 2016. The following year, we saw the Switch re-release with, I have to say it's my favorite version, and then we saw the PS VR version, all in 2017. So if you count that up, that's 5 releases. If you want to count the joke of Skyrim being on Alexa, that would be 6 versions, although, not really Skyrim, but I own all the releases except for the PS VR version, and I did contribute to the re-release problem, but I have no shame in my game for it either. If it wasn't re-released so many times, I may not have played this game again, so if it introduces new players to an old experience, then more power to them. To this day, I still play the game pretty obsessively, and I've dropped it recently in favor to play more Oblivion, but going back and getting the footage for this video, I snapped right back into Skyrim, and honestly, it's hard to stop. Skyrim is comfort food. You know how it tastes, you know how it's gonna look, and you know how much you're getting. It's so wonderful to hit continue and to be back in Tamriel. The gameplay holds up well with a menu system that just works on PC and consoles, and yeah, the combat can still feel a bit floaty in some areas, but with one- and two-handed weapons, archery, multiple schools of magic such as destruction, conjuration, or restoration, not to mention the fact that you can enchant and build your own weapons, craft your own potions, create poisons to apply to your weapons for more damage. It's not like you're stuck in a class or under a birth sign to govern your own attributes. If you want to use a new skill, you just try it. You will suck at it, but with a little bit of grinding, you're able to create a new character build within hours. I think ultimately what sticks out to me and makes this game so amazing are three different theories: exploration, immersion, and discovery. It can almost work like a recycling logo, if you will, where the more you explore, the more you're immersed. And the more you're immersed, the more explorative you are, and the more discoveries it leads to. And this is why I can play Skyrim for over 400 hours in a year and still feel like I haven't experienced everything that this game has to offer. I think just because Bethesda is getting a bad rap doesn't mean we should forget what they have produced in the past and what they can produce in the future. Skyrim wasn't a joke when it released in 2011, and it helped streamline some of the RPG processes and created a game that is accessible to beginners and can be mastered by experts. Two people can play this game and play the same quests, but there are so many variables that gamers will have a totally different experience with the same game. I'm glad I got a chance to be immersed in this masterpiece and love the effect that The Elder Scrolls has had on my gaming preferences in the last year or so. From someone who played almost platformers and shooters exclusively to someone who branched out to even turn-based combat because of my enjoyment of Elder Scrolls, I have nothing but fondness in my retrospective. I poured a lot of soul into writing this retrospective, and just being able to share my thoughts on a game that stirs up a lot of emotion and passion has just been fun. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing my Skyrim perspective as a newer player, and hopefully you can find some of the magicka yourself.
This